Right.
Catalyst 2030 started life as a WhatsApp group among social entrepreneurs, connecting to envision real transformational change. Launched at the World Economic Forum in January 2020, it's grown into a global movement accelerating change to ensure the SDGs are reached by 2030. Fueled by passion, our 550 members working in 175 countries have collectively put in an amazing 50,000 volunteer hours, touching the lives of 2 billion people. And we're driven by values, to which we hold ourselves accountable. 2020 was a busy year, co-creating 3 reports with partners and producing one of our own. Inviting high-level guests to participate in the Catalyzing Change campaign, hosting fireside chats and expert hours, which will be continuing in 2021. To celebrate our achievements, together we placed our supporters in the limelight with the first Catalyst 2030 Awards for Systemic Change. With the blessing of the Dalai Lama, we celebrated finalists and winners in the following categories: special recognition for our early supporters, individual philanthropists, donor organizations, philanthropic intermediaries, corporate organizations, bi- and multilateral organizations, and 4 regional winners in the category of national governments. And now on to Catalyzing Change Week 2021. During this social entrepreneur-led event, we bring together diverse stakeholders in over 100 sessions to showcase their systems change efforts and the best practices that can accelerate our work in pursuit of the SDGs.
Hello, everybody. Hello. There are loads of people here, lots I recognize as well. So good to see you all. I'm Rebecca Eastmond. I'm co-founder and CEO of Greenwood Place, which acts as an outsourced executive team and advisor for philanthropists. And I am delighted to be here today and to introduce my partner, Sonal Shah, who you can hopefully see, and 3 of Greenwood Place's grantee partners, Andrew Bastawrous from Peak Vision, Sasha Fisher from Spark Microgrants, and Pankaj Sharma from Transform Schools. Quick note, please stay on mute because this is a Zoom call, so you could just kind of dive in and start talking, but please don't. Please put your questions in the chat. And Lavissa from Catalyst asked me to say that the session will be recorded. So if you need to drop out or if you want to listen to it later, please feel free. So each of our panelists has really deep experience and also a fascinating personal journey that we have no time to delve into today. So please do check their websites, sign up for their listservs. For now, we have just an hour to dig right into our panelists' experience of designing for scale and their journey to outsized impact so far. So we're going to, without further ado, quick fire question. Andrew, then Pankaj, and then Sasha. What is the problem that you're trying to solve?
Thanks, Rebecca. So the problem myself and my team are trying to solve is that there's 1.1 billion people today who live with vision loss, and 90% of them have an entirely curable condition. So they could be treated with a pair of glasses, 700-year-old invention, or cataract surgery. And 90% of those people are living in low middle income countries. And the issue currently is in terms of how we innovate the delivery of services. And that's the journey that we're currently on.
Thank you. Sasha.
Thanks, Rebecca. And so good to be here with you all today. So thrilled that Greenwood Place was highlighted as well. I run Spark Microgrants, and there's a huge issue in our world today where communities facing poverty have brilliant ideas to drive local change, but do not hold the resources. Folks who are more proximate to wealth hold the resources and tend to make those decisions for communities. And we believe we should let communities make those decisions themselves.
Thank you. Pankaj.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you so much for having me. Transform works on secondary education outcomes and access in India. And we know today that for about 16 million kids who are in our secondary schools, there could be half as many more there. So we intend to get more kids to complete their secondary education and to ensure that these guys attain the learning outcomes that they deserve by a vibrant, powerful public education system.
Thank you. So small problems, right? So, how did you come to the intervention that you're implementing now? I'm wondering, did you have the answer on day one? And if not, how did you figure out the solution that you currently are working on that you think people are really asking for? Andrew, can I ask you first?
Sure. I mean, the journey started very personally for me in that I grew up with poor sight myself and was continually told I was failing at school and not paying attention. And it turned out all I needed was a pair of glasses. And the day I got them, my life was completely transformed. And I was forever struck with the injustice of how something so simple as a pair of glasses was being distributed. And my family originally come from Egypt, and I was seeing that no one there was wearing glasses. And that eventually took me on a journey to becoming an eye surgeon, and then spending 2 years living in Kenya, where I could see there were systematic barriers to access, which were not unique to the vision space, but were basically that there was a lack of awareness around the solution. There was cost barriers, there were distance barriers, there were fear barriers. And actually the number of stakeholders and the complexity of the system to solve what seems on the end of it a very simple problem is incredibly complex. And so for me, the journey started by solving some of the simpler problems and then unearthing much more complex ones underneath, and just continually going deeper and deeper into trying to provide system solutions that bring together the range of stakeholders and generate accountability around solving the actual problem that we're all trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, in the time that I've known you, you probably had 3 different things that you've done. I mean, really. So that kind of, I guess, is testament to the complexity.
Yeah, I mean, it started from very much a gadget that helped you see inside the back of the eye with a smartphone, to actually, so what, once you found out someone that couldn't see, they couldn't see. So then you had to connect them to the people who could treat them, but there was a lack of people who could treat them. So how do you increase those resources and how do you close down the gap? And so it's really evolved time and time again to now finding that there's intractable funding issues. How do you serve those who are most in need of the benefit but are least able to resource it? And so, yeah, the problem expands, but also the solutions get more exciting.
Pankaj, does any of that resonate with you? I mean, you started in quite a different place than you are now, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's so interesting that when Andrew spoke about this, I could sort of see parallels there. And, much like Andrew, I've had sort of educational setbacks. I've struggled with school. I have the unique experience of being a chief executive who's taken a couple of years to clear a school examination. So that's sort of on my CV. And when I started working for a super organization, which is very, very patient investor in education in India, I had the time and the space to try and understand that what is it that these kids in rural schools don't have that I had available, which allowed me to pick up, sort of the smash bits of my, sort of educational journey up and build it ground up and do really well moving forward. And I think sort of the clear piece was that the school system has pieces available which can support the kids, which can help them focus on their foundational competencies and nurture them rather than trying to get them to do well just on the grade level pieces. And that's something that we took almost 5 years to figure out and build in partnership with children, with teachers, with parents, and also working with a very clear view in our mind that if this is not scalable, if this doesn't have impact, there's no point of doing this because they, size of a population that India has, this has to work for multiple locations and it has to work at a minuscule budget. So we kept that in mind, but I think like Andrew, a part of this somewhere subconsciously was powered by my own sort of lack of education at a certain point, and then picking up the pieces and building them.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Sonal. I'm going to bring Sonal in now. And just what do you look for as a funder when you're searching for something that just might make a significant difference at scale?
Sure. So this is a really current question for me at the moment, because I'm deep diving into 4 organizations who all have massive potential for scale. They're all working on different issues, different geographies. Some of the problems on the surface and some of the solutions are relatively simple. Some are really complex. But I guess when we apply the scaling lens to each of these organizations, there's kind of 5 key things that we're searching for. And the first is that the organizations have a really clear understanding of what their addressable need or their addressable market is. So it's not just about the scale of the need, but it's about understanding how your intervention can tackle that problem, what it can do, what part of the problem it can tackle, and conversely, what it can't. So we tend to see a really clear focus, I think, from those sorts of organizations on their audience and really understanding their audience. The second thing, and this is interlinked, is about what the enabling factors are. So the core enabling factors needed to make that intervention work. And I'm not talking here about the core enabling factors at scale. I'm talking about the core enabling factors at all. So I've had a very interesting conversation with a farmer livelihoods organization recently in India. And what they've said is that, look, the farmers that we are going to be able to work with are ones whose income relies heavily on their farm. They're ones that can spend a couple of days every single day, a couple of hours every single day on their farm. And they are ones that are situated in areas where there are some kind of existing infrastructure for market linkages. And if those enabling factors aren't there, then this isn't going to work at all, let alone at scale. So they're really clear about that. And thirdly, interlinked again, is about organizations that understand what are the barriers to getting to scale, and what can they do to mitigate those. They may not have figured out the solution yet, but they're really clear about what the problems are and what the roadblocks are. I think, Pankaj, you hinted on it. The fourth thing is about scaling, can't mean ever scaling costs. So what are they doing to make their financial and operational model work at scale? And often that is through leveraging partnerships, leveraging government. And the fifth thing here is something that really reminds me of Peak, Andrew's work at Peak. It's kind of where you move from scale to systems change, I think. Do those organizations have a vision, an aspiration of an ecosystem shift that will happen at some point, not through their direct intervention, but through the kind of behaviors and the systems that they've tried to change along the way? So I think for us at Greenwood Place, and I'm sure my colleagues would have loads of things to add, but for us, organizations that have the potential to scale will have demonstrated at least some of these characteristics, and we'll be looking at them.
Thank you, Sonal. And no, I agree with all of that. That's good. Sasha, I wondered, can you talk a little bit about what you're implementing now, your intervention, and also once you landed on that, what it's been in your experience that's got communities behind it, what's mobilized communities, whose buy-in has been important, and you just tell us about your stakeholders, how you listen to them and how you bring them, how you're creating this great thing together.
Thanks, Rebecca. And so great to learn about all this work on this call too. When we started Spark, we asked the question of, is it possible to support any rural village to design and implement their own social impact project? Just like NGOs go out into the world with great solutions and bring an idea to a village. We said, is it possible to open opportunities for villages, not just 1 or 2 or 10 or 20, but for thousands of villages? And we started iterating on a village granting model that was a grant and a little bit of organizing. So we would bring women and men, young and old, together to sit in a village meeting and discuss together themselves what the vision they have for their village and what they want to achieve, what ideas do they have for local projects. And we set a rule at Spark saying that we could not suggest any project ideas. We could not suggest any problem or solution or project idea. The only thing that we could suggest is to make sure that the meetings where the determination was happening over the project would be somewhat inclusive. So you couldn't just have the men speaking, you had to have women and men speaking, young people and old people speaking. And we would commit upfront to giving money to every village, even before we knew what project idea they had. Over time, that has evolved into a village planning and grant making process, which looks like an annual village planning, where citizens and residents sit together, plan together for their future, and then Spark provides or our partners provide an $8,000 seed grant and annual financing on an annual basis for communities to take action. And to Rebecca's point of like, how do we engage our stakeholders? We kind of have seen this progression over the course of development where like it started, we see three main phases. Like it started as prescriptive, like we as an NGO would have come in and like told the community, build this water tap and then thank us for it. That doesn't work because the water tap falls apart. Then like the more popularized model today is participatory development, where you like go in with your water well and you say, community members, help me figure out where to put the water well, or you can decide what your financing structure will look like for the water well. But it's still like kind of tokenistic participation. You're like asking people for their input still for your own project idea. And then the third model that we're pushing for now that we tried to role model, or our partner organizations try to role model, is community-driven development, where community members, the benefiting members of whatever your organization is seeking to support, they actually have the decision-making power, not just voice, but decision-making power over what is those resources are going towards. And we've been picked up recently. The government of Rwanda came to a partner village that we had worked with when we were kind of in direct deployment mode. And they said, what is going on in this village? Citizens are coming to our government meetings more than anybody else. They're participating more. They're going from like some of the worst rates of poverty to like accelerating very quickly to higher levels of income. And what's going on in this village, and how do we do it as the government of Rwanda as well? And so we've started training the government of Rwanda and working in collaboration with the government and the World Bank to institutionalize this to the point of systems change. How do we make this the norm across the country so that comprehensively every village will have that opportunity on an annual basis to plan and to take action together as a community, and shift that narrative from just having voice to actually having that decision-making power as the key stakeholder. And maybe we become the stakeholder instead of the community, or the community becomes the like power holder.
Brilliant. Sasha, thanks so much. Pankaj, can I ask you more or less the same question? So can you talk us through your solution, and then what is it in your experience has mobilized communities behind it, and whose buy-in has been most important?
So I think one of the advantages that we started off with was that we were able to build a clear model that can improve learning outcomes. But having done that, you realize that that's where sort of the tough part begins. And as Sasha said, that you cannot, even if you're working in a systemic partnership, you cannot, it's not ethical, and it's also not going to happen if you try and enforce your will on the school, on the students, on the teachers. And clearly not going to happen if you're trying to do that with your government partners who are funding sort of the majority cost of any intervention like this. And I think where it sort of really started to work for us is that when we were able to work in tandem with all these partners, where students and their parents, after pushing back and questioning that why students were again revisiting concepts that they had covered in past grades, or teachers who were trying to shift the blame onto elementary school teachers or primary school teachers, started to realize that if they were investing time put aside, for foundational focus for students, they would gain, they would be able to cover things much faster. Kids were learning much faster. Or sort of the education departments, and sort of led by pretty dynamic, secretaries of education, which came around to saying that we've been running these programs each year, but there's nobody measuring what's going on. And, keeping in mind that you were focused on the entire system and yet focused on each child and measuring, sort of their improvement over time. And once we sort of started to put all of this together, we realized that this is not only about learning. It is about, who can access these learning programs, who can stay on and complete all the sessions, and who had the resources to take this and build on it. And I think that's where our equity focus started to come in. So in some ways, this has been a journey which has been evolving, but started with having a very clear theory of change, very clear means of measuring those, and taking the system along, with you, and sort of having across system partners.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Andrew, can I ask you the same thing? Whose buy-in has been really important to you? Who are your stakeholders? How do you listen to them?
Thanks. I'm fascinated by Sasha and Pankaj's work. It sounds amazing, and lots of parallels. So the value proposition that we have is a smartphone-based solution that helps anyone who doesn't have to be a health worker identify people who can be invisible to the system. So it helps them find people who don't see, and then track them all the way through to the services. And our real focus is on who doesn't get there. So the typical metrics would be around how many people did you find and how many did you treat? And there's a constant push around measuring activity. And we've got great activity reports we can talk about, like our first RCT that was published in The Lancet, 21,000 children screened in 9 days by 25 teachers. But actually we thought it's the footnote that was important there, is how many people got missed at screening, and how many people got referred to treatment but never got there, and how many people got treatment but it didn't work for. Now those things aren't that attractive to talk about, but that's what we're actually on a mission to try and make the norm. So we call it internally our metrics that matter. And so one of the key things for us in terms of our stakeholders are, who do those metrics matter for as well? Who are driven by ensuring that those with an unmet need actually get their need met. And that means we can journey together on solving the problem. So our role, similar to kind of the journey Sasha was sharing, is we've gone from being an implementer of our own school and community-based eye health programs to partnering with organizations who want to create equitable and effective programs. And what it looks like on that journey is we start to identify systemic barriers in the program, people who are not turning up, and they tend to be, the most powerful data we have is around widowed women are 3 to 5 times more likely not to get the service. And actually that wasn't known prior to the data being collected, but when you start to focus the way the program is implemented around those groups who are being left behind, suddenly you get a lot more impact for your investment. And so our journey is around trying to find stakeholders who are open to evolving as the program moves on. And that sometimes breaks the traditional mold of planning everything up front and budgeting everything up front, because we go in not knowing what's going to happen. And we actually want the program to be a learning program. And then the solutions to be community driven, saying, well, I don't know from sat here in my yurt in Oxfordshire what someone in rural Kenya needs to access that service, but we know that this subgroup is not getting there. So can we ask them, what is it they need to overcome that barrier? And we've kind of, our partnerships have grown to NGO and government level solutions now to try and work in that systemic way.
So Andrew, I think everything you've said about who's missing, about the footnotes in the RCT, either Pankaj or Sasha could have said as well. And you're looking for the systemic barriers and then figuring ways around or over or under them. Thank you. Sonal, I had a question for you, which was, what would you single out as the key elements of a great organization that you might want to work with on this kind of journey?
Well, I think these guys have demonstrated lots of it already. I'm not sure. But look, there's all the normal things that we look at. We look at track record, we look at the skills, the background of the people involved, the impact, governance, ambition. But actually, I think I think if I was to single out two elements, they're more about culture and values. And these are things that are really difficult to assess when you're looking at an organization. I'm not sure you can ever really know it as a funder, but over the years of working with an organization, benefit of having long-term relationships, you get a feel for these things. And I guess these are the things that would really stand out for us in terms of people's potential for future impact. And the first is really about the style of leadership. So, you know, is it empathetic? Ashoka talks a lot about empathy and leadership, and that's something that we definitely look for. You know, are the leaders empathetic? Are they inclusive? Are they thoughtful? Are they self-reflective? And you see it across, you know, Sasha, Pankaj, and Andrew. You see it in droves. Do they build and invest in the organization's people? Do they distribute leadership? So is it not just about the person at the top, but all the people around? And do they genuinely care about the issue and the people on the ground? And you'd think that everybody in this sector does, but I would hold a hand up and say I beg to differ on that. I don't think everybody does. I think you can really kind of see the difference in those people. The second element for us, I would say, is about honesty, transparency, and learning. So organizations that own up to their challenges and own up to their difficulties and say, look, this is what we did wrong, this is why we got it wrong, and this is what we've learned from it. Owning up to all of that, for us, is a real sign of organizations that can evolve better in the future and serve their purpose with more impact. And Rebecca's disappeared on that note. She didn't agree with anything I said.
Sonal, that was beautiful. I love you highlighting culture and values as well as sharing learnings and challenges, and appreciate that you guys have always been so like forthcoming, having open conversations and building that relationship. It matters on our end too, I think.
Oh, that's good to know. I'm assuming somebody's texting Rebecca. Give me a second, sorry. Maybe what we'll do is I'll just switch to moderator for a minute while she makes her way back. So I'm just having a look. Well, actually, I think we're still on the funding aspect of this. And I think the next question is to Andrew and Pankaj. It would be great to get your take on what you see as the characteristics of a good funder when it comes to kind of high risk, but potentially high impact solutions. Maybe Pankaj, you can start, and then Andrew.
Sure. It's a difficult question, considering that you know, so folks like us are always asking for money. So sort of to highlight that, you know, sort of what is it that you're looking for also means that what is it that you're trying to avoid. So not the smartest thing to do on a webinar this size. But so here goes sort of my three sort of focus areas, which I really like to look at when I'm working with donors and trying to see, you know, can they be potential investors in what we do. So I think really looking at their focus, sort of that alignment on, you know, what you're out to do, what you're out to achieve, and in our case, really focusing on outcomes, to be a very outcomes-focused organization. You know, that is really helpful. So we do look out for donors who are looking at outcomes, not so much in terms of activities or the minutiae, you know, around, you know, did you sort of hold so many sessions and so on and so forth, but really looking at outcomes as a focus. I think the second thing which we really focus on in terms of donors and is empathy for the cause, but also for how hard it is to be a social entrepreneur. And I think, again, you know, Sonal, as sort of the one that you spoke about, this is not very easily measurable, but you can see in the way people treat you, people talk about your solutions, you know, do they come back to you pretty rapidly, even if they put you in a holding pattern and say, you know, we are looking at this and we will come back to you. Sort of the respect that they give to your work, or how hard it is, in addition to, you know, what you're trying to do with the communities in sort of that collaborative space. And I think the third, which is, again, in today's day and age is super important, is, you know, sort of the return on time invested. So if you know, so, and I think there are several that we work with for whom sort of the application is no longer than a page. You know, there are many conversations that go on, and often they are very rapid and they're collaborative. So you're out to sort of solve a problem. It's clear that you alone would not be able to solve it, and is your donor collaborating with you very, very rapidly to look at ways of solving that problem. And I think that's the third one, which tells us literally the future of this relationship, because you know that you will struggle, you know that you will falter at times, and can you work in a very rapid, nimble way, with your funder, with your investor, so that truly an investor's mindset where you're looking at, how do you help this grow, or how do you solve these problems together. So I think those would be the three that I would always focus on, and I do. I'm also lucky that we have a few that we work with, which always check these boxes.
Great. Thank you. Rebecca, we just moved on to the characteristics of a good funder.
I guessed that. Thank you very much. My internet seems to be pretty ropey, so if I disappear again, guys, please carry on without me. I wanted to know, I guess I think I should ask Andrew, can you talk to us, actually I'll ask Pankaj first. Can you talk to us about scaling in partnership with others? So none of you have built what you do alone. And I'm interested in what surprised you about partnership working. And also, can you share a story with us, a story of a challenge overcome or an unexpected moment of opportunity? So first of all, just talk to us about partnership and what surprised you, and then maybe a story.
So in some ways, what we've been able to achieve at Transform Schools really goes down to how we've been able to partner with governments, so state governments in India, and how our interventions are sort of clearly nestled in what they are trying to achieve as opposed to what we want to achieve. And that scale journey is predominantly funded, delivered, measured by state government, schools, teachers, master trainers, content developers, what have you. So it's sort of really a deep system level partnership. And with each state that we add on, and each state which signs on to work with us, we do outline some of these requirements both ways. So to make it very transparent that what is it that we can bring onto the table, and what is it that they need to sort of deliver and partner on. And I think sort of one of the pieces which is clear in our head is that we're not the solution. We are a part of the solution, and we can support willing, focused state governments to solve the learning challenges for kids who access public school system. Now, even in an established state like Odisha, where we've been working for over multiple years, so almost five and a half years, our ability to scale with as many funders as we would have netted to the entire state, reaching almost 300,000 students would have been impossible had the state not looked at the model, if they had not sort of understood the evidence. And now we do have a couple of sort of deep research studies, randomized controlled trials under our belt, but those were early days. But for them to really look at the quality of the solution and how dynamic it was, and how it measured outcomes, is something that powered us to sort of, start hitting scale. And even in this partnership, which is a very strong partnership, which is great, we realize that how you are sometimes blindsided and you don't see what's sort of just under your eyes or sort of under your nose. And what we realized was that while we were partnering with the government and partnering with the main department which delivers education, we started engaging with another not-for-profit, and they're quite renowned, and they're called Akshara Foundation, and they kept sort of engaging with us, and we kept thinking that we're not donors, we don't have a lot to offer to them. Why are they looking to partner with us? And their state head, and her name is Lipsa, she kept saying that, we're working in the elementary school space, you guys are working in the secondary school space. There has to be, sort of a space where you can come together and collaborate. And to be very honest, so, when you're sort of really focused on scaling your solution and somebody is not a donor, is not an implementer, is not your government partner, they often don't end up to, being your priority. And, so to give credit to this organization and this partner, we started to engage with an allied department which works with groups of kids who come from scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. They are exceptionally disadvantaged. So even when you look at the public school system, these kids are sort of worse off. And what I was really surprised by is, and a bit ashamed as well, that we weren't working in partnership with these schools. And it took, a new partner to say, hey, let's go and support these schools. And in some ways, we were able to double our student level reach, in Odisha through this new partnership, which we got literally muscled into, by somebody who just wouldn't be shaken off.
Thank you.
And I think what's sort of very valuable is that these kids are most vulnerable, even amongst the vulnerable. And I think that's sort of the power of partnership and listening to, not just your donors, not just your government partners, but also to your peers.
And that's a wonderful story, Pankaj. Thank you. Sasha, do you have a wonderful story?
Sure. I was loving, Pankaj, what you were sharing there. And it was making me think about a lot of the work that we have done. And I'll start with in the last year with COVID, we've seen 100 to 150 million people backslide into extreme poverty. This is staggering. We are not the only ones who care about this at Spark. There's lots of mega organizations that care about this. And simultaneously, in the last 15 years, consistently, every year, democracy has been in decline. These are two mega global trends that obviously it's all of us are tiny little NGOs just trying to do little nudges here and there around. But there's these mega institutions like the World Bank and governments that actually do define how these trends are going. And I feel like I grew up in a very in an era where we highly criticized the World Bank, for example, and said oh, it builds all these big infrastructure projects and it hurts communities and this and that. And a few years ago at Spark, when the government of Rwanda asked us to train them in our methodology and it basically integrate Spark's model, village planning and action process into government, we said, oh, that sounds great. We want to do that. And you can't do that alone. And the World Bank came and said, oh, we want to fund work like this. We don't know how to get decentralized funding from the national level of government down to the village level. But if you figured that out, that's fantastic. And they came in as a partner to help fund a pilot with government for that. So all of a sudden, we went from tiny little NGO kind of scrappily running this process at a community level to working with the national government of Rwanda and the World Bank on how do we nationalize this program. And my thinking also, I think I just have to admit that it has evolved massively on the World Bank and a lot of the bilaterals that say, and national governments that say they want to figure out how to decentralize resources to more localized levels, but don't have a solution for how to do that. Structurally, it's very challenging, especially if a village doesn't have a bank account. So all of a sudden, all of these partners are working together to enable a new village kind of governance model in Rwanda. And out of that, we've seen, women who have participated for the first time in a village planning process all of a sudden start running for political office too and get higher and higher up the ranks, which has been fun to see. But on the side of that, we've also started a bunch of work with the World Bank to help them transform how do they spend their $2.7 billion fund for community development in a way that really gets their money closer to people, developing a set of standards, developing a set of shared practices around how do we help that money move more closely to the community level. And that's been extremely exciting to engage with. And now I'm just a huge proponent for the World Bank because I think they're doing some really progressive work out there, trying to move really mega amounts of money to people who have the smallest amount of it today.
Thank you, Sasha. Rebecca's dropped off again, but actually we followed your journey over the last 4 years, so we've kind of seen that transition, right? This time 4 years ago, you weren't talking about that. So that's phenomenal. I think she's about to come back in a minute, but and Andrew, maybe there you go, Rebecca. So, you're on mute. Sasha just finished her segment on that.
Oh, for goodness, this is terrible. What happens if you get booted out? For everyone to know, if you get booted out because your internet's dodgy, you have to re-register to get back in. It's like, I'm really sorry. I was going to just ask, I guess the next question would be that all of you are on the journey to outsized impact. And I don't think any of you would say that you've arrived right now. Just watching Peak Vision over the past few weeks, I'd say you're further on than you were a month ago. So I kind of wondered, could you talk to us a little bit about some moment that you'd single out as a turning point and what the characteristics were of that? And maybe Andrew, we should start with you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a difficult question because I think there's been many, but they've all had a similar flavour, if you like. So if I think back to the earliest one, and then I'll share the most recent. So some people on my team will have heard me talk about this story, but this is about 10 years ago when I was living in Kenya and just kind of getting to that stage where there was a crazy idea that I was convinced could work. And then I started to think maybe it's just that I'm crazy because everything was going wrong. And we'd moved there with a 1-year-old son. We'd kind of, put a lot of our kind of existing things at risk. And then suddenly everything that was meant to happen didn't. The money that we had for the program, a lot of it disappeared. Some of it was stolen. Equipment broke down. We didn't feel particularly safe. And I just got to this point where I thought, I don't know if I can do this. Actually, I don't know where. I was so convinced that this would be possible, and the reality of it is so much harder than I thought. And I was running with a really good friend of mine who I'd made whilst living there, and I was just kind of offloading on him. I was just saying, look, everything's going wrong. I think I've had enough now. And he just stopped whilst we were running and said, Andrew, when an aeroplane is running down the runway, it only takes off after it's hit its maximum resistance. He said, you're at that point now, so you must not stop. And it gave me a real moment to kind of reflect and think, gosh, that if we want to make things change or you want to do things that matter, they never come easily. And you often, the harder you push at it, the greater the resistance comes. And that's kind of manifest so many times. And it's been about myself and my team just not giving up. And that most recently has manifested in that we've been on this long journey to take something to government scale. And we've been working with the government of Botswana since 2015. And we worked on their next, their 5-year national strategy. We saw that there was no school eye health program. We managed to raise funding to do a school eye health program for 13,000 children that was really effective. And then we realized that actually the incentive for this program was different for different stakeholders. For the Ministry of Education, it was about educational outcomes. For the Ministry of Health, it was about health outcomes. For potential donors, it was about an impact journey and story and return on that donation. And we managed to pull all of these together to get to the point where we were awarded a tender to deliver a national program with the government for every school child in the country. And we thought, this is such a breakthrough for us. But then it was a nearly 4-year journey from, agreement from the president with them, in the public domain, with the Minister of Health and the Minister of Education all agreeing to this, and then nearly 4 years to us actually signing a contract. And we had to resource that with a team, with a plan. We were always kind of ready to go. And I think that's the reality of this kind of work. So it's that mindset of there will be resistance and you should never give up. And you need good people with you who will help you push through that. And Greenwood Place being a perfect example of that. You all want the same outcome, but the journey there is unknown.
Pankaj, anything you'd like to reflect on that? Any moment that you'd single out on your journey that's helped?
I mean, so for us at Transform, there was a sort of a terrifying period where we were at about this time last year. So if you build something for scale and impact, you're very clear that you need to have both. So you need to have impact, but you also need to have impact at scale. And we were both audacious and foolish to enter into to embark on a research to with J-PAL funded and supported researchers to look at this. And in hindsight, I thought it was a risk, and it was a bit too soon. But I spent agonizing weeks and months, and I probably chewed Rebecca's brain and every other intelligent person that I knew, including my daughter, her brain about what if the results actually come as sort of null or negative. Here we were, we had a solution. The solution was being scaled by a partner government using its resources. It was already at massive scale. And imagine if the research shows that you don't have the requisite impact at scale. And I think for me that was a major sort of pivotal point. And one of the conversations that we were having with one of the principal investigators on this research, Dr. Jason Kerwin, I thought he was sort of very easy about this, and as sort of a researcher who's looking to evaluate also a successful, intervention. His point was, it is what it is. And for a moment, I was a bit taken aback, thinking that that's sort of very laid back, and we just spent 6 years building this and trying it out, and sort of in scaling it in partnership with governments. His whole point was, and I thought which was very powerful, saying that it's the purity of your intent and the efforts that you're putting in and your candid admission that you are out to evaluate this for what it is really worth, which is impact at scale. And if your research is showing that you're not having the impact, you need to go back to the drawing board. And for folks who genuinely support the cause and who are not invested in the pathway A or pathway B, they will go back and invest in you, and you will go back to the drawing board to build this better. And I thought that was such a powerful point for me personally, but also for the team, where we felt that we needed to be very clear about what we were out to do, and we needed to be fearless about it. Because the moment you are sort of fearful of it, you come up with excuses and you come up with sort of reasons to justify lack of impact. And we see this, Rebecca, now. So with every state government, those RCT results are very interesting sort of numbers to sign up a partnership. But with each state government, each year's outcomes are what matters. So it's like having a great batting average, but what did you score on a given day? And I thought sort of balancing both is what I want to do. And I think that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't heard Jason say it is what it is, which it sort of set me free in some ways.
Thank you. That's a great story. Can I jump in with Louis Bostein has asked a really good question in the chat, so I'm just going to throw it in, and you decide if you want to answer. But how have your boards or other governance mechanisms helped you along the path to scale? Have they asked the tough questions that he says you all seem to ask yourselves, and have your board evolved as your needs evolved? So Sasha, should I ask you first? Is that okay?
Sure, thanks. And what a good question. We're constantly thinking about what's the dream board and governance model look like here, especially as we challenge maybe some of the norms of governance between nonprofits and those we seek to serve. I've been very fortunate to have an incredible board and also a group of advisory members, including Rebecca and Sonal at Greenwood Place, actually, who are not afraid to push back and to ask questions that help us think more critically. One of the things I'll say that our board, I'm very grateful for, is they often ask us interrogative questions and make sure that we have all of our risks, assessments done, and that we have followed all the legal procedures and things like that. But that they also always ask what the bigger dream or aspiration is. And I'll just call out for a minute that with female entrepreneurs or women leaders, they often get asked more about risk than opportunity. And so you get smaller pools of capital. Only like 3% of venture capital goes to women-led companies because they get asked about risk. And so you start thinking smaller scale. And so I have incredible board members who have like kind of, made sure to ask constantly, what's the big dream? What's the next iteration of Spark that you want to invest in today? Even if you're not looking at the history, how would you position Spark for the future? And it's allowed us to pivot and make some risky moves to go from doing a direct deployment model where we're working directly, our staff, with community partners, to training civil society organizations and governments, to now working on some initiatives with the World Bank to change how their funding is flowing to governments. And our board members have just been fantastic to ask those questions and allow us to dream. And I feel like the business world also gets to really dream big and raise like mega rounds of capital. In the nonprofit sector, we have much smaller pools of capital that we tend to work with at the startup phase. And when our board members have asked us about that big dream, they've also backed us with the capital to do it. And that has allowed us to actually make those pivots, instead of you pivot your business model and all of a sudden you lose your donors because they were attached to your last business model. That is just, I've been so grateful for that.
Thank you. Andrew, can you talk a bit about your board?
Yeah, I've been privileged to have an incredible board, and Rebecca being an amazing part of that. And a lot of it has been about keeping that single-minded focus on the big vision, whilst holding me and the team to account about the steps we're taking towards it, and making sure we're continually asking those important questions. And I think part of the key to the success of having a good board has been the mix of and diversity of people on the board, coming from different backgrounds with different experiences, that have meant they can just ask that question or those questions with a slightly different filter. I've got a lot of colleagues in the social enterprise space who are deeply unhappy with their boards and feel very unsupported. So I don't take for granted the fact that I have such a supportive board, but there's the balance between supportive and challenging. And I feel that's one of the key ingredients. And the thing I've always looked for in a chair of the board has been a similar risk profile, because I think generally if you're a social entrepreneur, you are willing to take risk. Otherwise you wouldn't be doing what you're doing in the first place. And you can have great governance structures, but governance tends to put boundaries and clear lines. And most social entrepreneurs like to break down clear lines and boundaries. And so it can create a lot of friction. So you actually need someone who is willing to accept a level of risk. It doesn't mean being negligent, but it means saying, look, if we stifle the risk, we actually stifle the spirit of this organization and its culture. And so for me, that's been a key mix, is having level heads who are willing to bet big. And so far, so good.
I think that's right, Andrew. And I've just realized that that's something that I think we look for as well, that level of risk match. I hadn't thought about it before, but it is really super important. So Chloe from Does Not Brides has asked a really good question, which she said, have any of you guys, not Sonal, but any of the other panelists, consider big bet philanthropy, 100 and change, audacious, as a means by which to scale up? Just kind of interested in what you think about this stuff. Sasha.
I love big bet philanthropy. I'm so glad that folks are trying out models for it. I think it's, hopefully we'll see it evolve over time. And if somebody wants to big bet on us, great. We want to reach 11 million people in Rwanda in the next decade. That takes a significant amount of scale up capital.
Great answer. So, actually, Sonal, can I ask you, we're not in the big bet world at Greenwood Place, but we are interested in people who are taking risk and trying to go as fast and as far as they can. From your experience, what would you say to the funders watching about how they can enable the journey to outsized impact? I mean, with due humility, because there are people who know a lot more than us.
Yeah, I am off mute, aren't I? Yeah. I think, obviously there are the obvious ones about unrestricted long-term funding, but I think there's three things that are really clear, really key. One is about being prepared to support through the tough times. And I think actually, Pankaj, Andrew, we've done that with both of you. We've been in at an earlier stage where there have been less other funders, and we've been comfortable with a higher level of risk, and we've supported through some challenging times. So I think that's really, really important, and it takes quite a mindset shift to do that. So I think especially when you've got clients on the one hand who might be quite risk averse, not all of them are. And then you've got, organizations that need to take those risks. It's quite a balancing act for us. But I think it's key if you're going to make a difference. The other one is about leaving preconceptions and biases at the door. So we all come with our preconceptions, and it's great when you get funding recommendations from other funders, but that can colour your perception. We all need to realise that this is a subjective world, to some great extent, actually. You can't get away from that. So you need to make up your own opinions, and you need to leave certain things at the door when you're dealing with organisations. And I think the last thing, and we constantly grapple with it, is about being proportionate. We say that we want to do this, but it's difficult because you're treading the line between knowing enough and not asking too much, and being prepared to go along on the journey. I guess those are the key ones.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask everyone, I'm going to ask our panelists to say it out loud, but could everyone just put in the chat the one takeaway that you'd like to leave everyone with, the one takeaway that you will remember from today's session? And can I ask Andrew, Sasha, Pankaj, and then Sonal just to give us your one takeaway?
Difficult one. I think, for me, it's inspiring hearing Sasha and Pankaj's story, and it's a reminder to me that there are so many good people who are doing whatever it takes to solve some of the biggest challenges that we have today, and it's worth it. It's hard and life is difficult and complicated, but why not have a difficult and complicated life pursuing something that matters? So it's just, for me, a privilege to be in the midst of inspiring people, and I hope that there are people on this call who will be inspired and share on that journey as well.
Thank you. Sasha, what one thing would you like to leave our guests with?
I've so appreciated hearing how everybody is on this call is starting to move towards more systems change and the complexity of systems change. It's not a simple 1 + 1 = 2 kind of equation, like you give a meal, you have somebody eats a meal, but dealing with the complexity of those systems and just the brilliance of the people who are here, and grateful for everybody spending their time investing in this complicated, messy work that none of us have perfectly figured out. So very moved by the human side of this and grateful for it.
Thank you. Pankaj.
I think the thing that I sort of take away is that even when you're very focused on your solution, I think it's sort of important to take a wider view, a longer view of things, and else you're just sort of steeped with today, with that outcome that you're focused on. And we're seeing it play out, unfortunately, in India with the health crisis. So we were so focused on today that we didn't think of what we needed to do 6 months, 12 months, several years down the line. And I read this recently, and I think this is something which is sort of a better way of saying it, is that only systems that get investment bounce back. So that's the only way of building resilient systems. And I think that needs to be done with several years ahead. And I think that's what I would focus on. So immediate success, immediate outcomes are great, but long-term success is what we're seeking.
Thank you. Sonal, last word for you.
Mine's a question, not a thought. I think it's really about asking what we as funders or intermediaries can do to make our relationships with grantees more of a partnership than a traditional funding grantee relationship. I don't know the answer to that. I think we're working on it, but I don't think we've got it clear yet. So that's my question to everybody. It's not a thought.
Thank you. And guys, it's exactly the end of our session time. So I would really like to talk to everybody who is in this room, who is not us. It's just like a shame. We've got such a big group and we can't. So thank you. You put something in the chat, Johan. So, you know, those that would like to carry on, Johan has sent a link. Thank you very, very much, everyone, for joining. I hope it was useful. Call us anytime, any of us, and take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, everyone.
So much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Session. Thanks, Rebecca. Really good. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.